Welcome everyone to the Fermentation Association's webinar of The Many Sides of Kefir. I'm Amelia Nielsen-Stoll, editor of TFA. We are a trade group that was launched to support producers who use fermentation to create delicious and often healthful food and beverages. Our goals are to help educate consumers about fermentation and its benefits, support scientific research into those health benefits, and work with food safety authorities to establish clearer and more appropriate regulations in regards to fermentation. Today, we bring you three great speakers: Julie Smolyansky, CEO of Lifeway Foods; Raquel Guajardo, fermentation author and educator; and Alex Lewin, fermentation author and educator. We have many questions already submitted and reviewed with our speakers. If there are additional topics you'd like to see addressed, please enter them in the chat below and we will try to get to them. I will come back at the end to ask questions. For now, I will turn it over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Amelia. My name is Alex Lewin. I'm on the advisory board of the Fermentation Association. I'm the author of Real Food Fermentation and the co-author with Raquel of Kombucha, Kefir, and Beyond. I spend most of my time in Oakland, California, in the US. I am a fermenter, a fermentation writer and educator, and a fermentation advocate. And my current fermentation interests include natto, which may be helpful with some of the potential problems with COVID. I don't want to say that it cures COVID because that's, and also hard kombucha, because I think that's, the world is ready for hard kombucha, and it's catching on in the US. I don't know about other places, but watch for it because it's coming. Among other things, I may have invented a drink called the Kimchi Michelada, and I may have invented a sandwich called the Kimchi Reuben. I have not seen mention of them on the internet prior to my making them, so for whatever that's worth. So that's me. Raquel comes to us from Monterrey, Mexico. She's a certified health coach from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, as am I. Actually, I neglected to mention that. She is the co-author with me of Kombucha, Kefir, and Beyond, and a founder of RGB Alimentos, RGB Pura Fermentación, and Ferment Oaxaca, and co-organizer of the Oaxaca Fermentation Congreso, which is happening this year, yes, in October. Under the RGB brands, she produces and sells sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, miso, vinegar, kombucha SCOBY, kefir grains, and bone broth. Julie Smolyansky became the youngest female CEO of a publicly held firm when she took over Lifeway Foods at the age of 27 in 2002. Since then, she's continued the company's growth trajectory with creative product development and marketing to bring kefir, the company's flagship product, into the US mainstream. Under her leadership, the company has expanded distribution throughout the US, Mexico, the UK, and Ireland, as well as portions of Central and South America and the Caribbean. She's been named to Fortune Business 40 Under 40, Fortune's 55 most influential women on Twitter, as one of the best Instagrammers of the 40 Under 40 list, and was recently named a 2020 Champion of Wellness by Very Well. What was the multiplier? How much has Lifeway grown since you joined? I remember the number, it's a large number, right?
It's big. Well, at least 10 times. It was about a $12 million business when I took over, and today it's over 100.
Wow. Not bad, not bad. Julie is a graduate with a bachelor's degree from the University of Illinois at Chicago. She's an emeritus member of the United Nations Foundation Global Entrepreneurs Council and was part of the 2015 class of Young Global Leaders of the World Economic Forum. She's produced several documentaries, including The Home Stretch, Honor Diaries, The Hunting Ground, and most recently, On the Record. In 2013, Julie co-founded a nonprofit, Test 400K, an organization dedicated to advocating ending the backlog of 400,000 untested rape kits in the United States. She released her first book, The Kefir Cookbook, an ancient healing superfood for modern life, recipes from my family table and around the world, in March of 2018. She lives in Chicago and is the mother of 2 girls.
Oh, read the whole bio.
Girls. I have 2 girls too.
Yeah, give it up for the girls.
Sorry, I didn't put that on my bio.
Well, no, we'll sort it all out. I did not see any part of your bio that seemed irrelevant, Julie. So I didn't want to shortchange our audience. So Raquel produces kefir grains and sells them commercially. And Julie produces kefir and not kefir grains, is that right? Or do you sell kefir grains also?
We actually do have a starter.
Okay, you do. Okay.
Yeah, we do.
Sorry.
It's not really, a big piece of our business. And, we're really here to create ease in getting kefir into everyone's hands.
Okay, so the first question is kefir or kefir? Raquel, you first.
Me, we say kefir.
Okay.
Kefir in Spanish.
Okay.
But that's my language.
Yes, it's beautiful. You roll your R's so lovely. In Russian, also, we say kefir. And in English at Lifeway and over the years, we've said both kefir and Kiefer. And I've heard it so many different ways, like Kiefer Sutherland. And
right. That's what I always think of.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think it's like tomato, soda, pop, and different. I notice it different if I'm like on the various coasts versus the Midwest. So as long as you drink it, I think we don't care how you say it.
Okay, good. That was the number one burning question, I think, for me at least. Now the next question that we got from a lot of people, another one that I have is like, what are the things you need to change when producing the drink at home versus producing it at a large scale for commercial distribution into channels where it'll be refrigerated hopefully, but it needs to have shelf life. Like what do you change? Because when I make kefir, I make it, I put it in the fridge. If I don't drink it in a couple of days, it separates. It doesn't usually go bad, but how do you change the process and the product while still keeping it traditional and authentic?
Well, I guess for the scaling and commercial production of it, I think the biggest, most stringent piece of all of it is the sanitation piece. Is when you're putting out millions of bottles into the public market versus just making it at home for kind of a quick one-time use or to be consumed in a couple of days. The sanitation pieces are really critical. It's the most important piece. Luckily, kefir is a highly acidic product, a high level of pH or low pH, which prevents other bacteria or food spoilage and whatnot. So that's a piece that we're always very thoughtful of. But we are also changing the process a little bit for commercial manufacturing, and I'm sure we'll get further into it. But our kefir has we fermented in such a way that it doesn't contain alcohol versus some of the grains at home that you might be making it when you're making it for yourself and you don't have a laboratory and you can't monitor and stop the various fermentation processes. Those are some of the differences, but we mitigate the unsealed vats through a process, and we control the fermentation. And so there's just more of a you know, there's pipes, there's vats, there's an entire big commercial manufacturing process. It's very kind of simple at home, and you know, Raquel can fill you in on how easy it is actually to make it at home. So you know, it's much more of a mass industrial kind of process where the sanitation is one of the most critical pieces of it. And you know, the various HACCP plans that we have, and just the overall food safety is kind of the biggest thing that we think about here. And we do pasteurize kefir. Of course, we have to pasteurize everything, but we pasteurize all of the ingredients, and we culture after pasteurization so that, you know, the grains, the kefir, the cultures and bacteria remain alive. I think it's one of the biggest problems with the kind of fermented products in the United States. Most of the yogurt has been over pasteurized, and most of the bacteria in the yogurt is not really living, at least from the, you know, labs that we've done, you know, testing some of the largest brands of yogurts in the country, and finding that they're, you know, very limited activity, if any at all at this point. So.
Raquel, do you have any thoughts about, yeah.
Well, that's why I don't sell kefir, because I don't have a mass production. I didn't have, you know, money, and it's not a tradition for my family like Julie's. So it's something I learned, you know, where with Monica Corrado. And then I figured, you know, Monterrey is in the north part of Mexico, and there's no tradition of kefir grains, not even, I think there was only kombucha, but it was called something else. But not water kefir, not milk kefir. But in Mexico City and south of Mexico City, it's huge. Everybody does it. It doesn't have a name. They just like, it's something you do, you know, my grandmother does, and so, you know, I started drinking it. I think, I don't know where my kefir grains, I think it was from Sanders Katz. I think so. I went to a workshop, and I brought some kefir grains home. I put them on a coffee mate because I didn't even have milk. And I was amazed that they were still alive when I came here, when I got to Monterrey. So I started drinking, and I started to like them. Then, you know, I had my sauerkraut and kimchi, and I said, what about selling kefir? It was too complicated because it over ferments like this. And I had so many other things to look after, you know? And so I decided that what I was gonna sell, because I saw Kombucha Camp on the internet sells like kefir grain starters. I said, well, there's nobody selling them in Mexico. So I started, you know, only online. So that's how it happened. I said, you know, kefir is too much for me, and you know, beverages, it's millions of dollars, right? If you want to do it right. So I said, okay, this is my thing. I'll sell the grains, and then we'll talk about all my problems starting to sell the grains.
I think, thank you, both of you. I think there's still like the kefir that we make at home, like you mentioned alcohol, Julie. My understanding is that where there's yeast, there's going to be alcohol, and that if maybe you get rid of the yeast and then you count on the bacteria to turn the alcohol into acid. But like, how do you avoid, I guess, alcohol, and how do you avoid continuing acidulation that leads to separation? If there's an easy answer to that.
Well, not really. And, you know, that's kind of a big part of our kind of trade secret. So won't go into too much depth there. But what I will say is that, and I kind of, referred to this earlier, is that, the process that we use to mitigate the alcohol is, with unsealed vats that control fermentation with a pH of about, a low pH. And so there could be a trace amount of alcohol, but in our testing, it's too low to be measured. And a level of 1 to 2% of alcohol and anything over 0.05% by volume would have to carry the warning from the FDA. And would not be available for purchase by minors. And that's one of the big reasons why, we control that. Obviously, we want our kefir to be consumed and safe for everyone, including children and pregnant mothers. And so, that's an important piece of our production process. But the exact process is a trade secret.
And do you use kefir grains, or do you use like some kind of vat injection, like culture inoculation?
Yeah. So the grains that we use are the original grains that my parents brought with them through the Soviet Union, when we immigrated from the former Soviet Union, and we smuggled in some of those grains, and then we replicate them and grow them in a lab now. But the original grains are unique to Lifeway. They're specifically formulated and reproduced to our specifications, but they originate from that very special grains that my parents and their ancestors used through this ancient process of preservation of dairy, of milk products that my ancestors passed down from the Caucasus Mountains generation to generation, for over 2,000 years. So it's very special to us. It's different than, let's say, your typical production of mass produced yogurt. And it's a very special family recipe.
Here's a question for both of you. Raquel first. Have you ever had live cultures confiscated at an international border?
No, thank God.
Or is there, can you just send them in the mail? Like, technically you're not supposed to transport them, I guess, but like, I don't know.
No, I just put them like with a little bit of milk in a small Ziploc bag, as if it was like a night cream, and put them on with all my toothbrush and everything. Fine, it's fine.
I've done that with sourdough now, and apparently you can use sourdough starter as a facial mask. So it's legitimate, I think, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Julie, you had anything confiscated?
Not really confiscated per se, but there's certainly issues like when we're shipping across country. There's a whole lot of bureaucracy and issues with that. And some countries won't let you even do it. I tried to do a couple of deals in Africa, and they won't allow any foreign bacteria into the country. So, or continent actually. But yeah, it's there are definitely, more and more regulations around bacteria. And it even distinctly lists at some borders that, you can't bring in various live agents or, bacteria. So, we did it over 40 years ago. My parents and I immigrated in 1976 from the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union. So, they were smuggling a whole bunch of other things too. They survived through smuggling and a black market system. So it's kind of intuitive to us.
What's funny to me is that governments think that national borders can prevent microbes from crossing, because like I don't remember what the last factoid was, but humans are 90% of the cells in my body are microbes, or something like that. Let's see. Uses for kefir besides drinking it. Like, what do you do with dairy kefir besides drink it?
Well, you touched on like a mask. I love kefir for skin as a mask, or even like a kefir bath. Cleopatra bathed in it. So it is really special for skin too, and just wellness on this other layer of bacteria that our skin, like you said, is mostly made up of bacteria. So it's great if you have like a sunburn, you know, I'll put it on my body if you know, a little too much sun. Let's see, what else can you do with it? I don't know. We can make a slip and slide or something in the backyard, pour it on. But, you know, I cook with it. You know, you alluded to a cookbook I wrote. I wanted to share all the versatility that you can use for it, that what, you know, wasn't even being used. You know, most people for decades and centuries really just drank it. And, you know, I started baking with it. I started making salad dressings and smoothies and smoothie bowls, and just kind of modernizing the usage of it. Marinating chicken. Oh my God, if you want the juiciest, most tender chicken, marinate your chicken in some plain kefir. Oh, to die for. So there is a lot of uses like that, but you know, most people use it and they come to Lifeway after a health crisis that they're experiencing. And usually health crises tend to involve a round of antibiotics. And we know that, you know, antibiotics destroy all of the, not only bad bacteria of whatever's making you sick, but also wipes out your good bacteria. And we need that microflora, that good friendly bacteria to keep our bodies functioning, you know, digestion, your immune system, your mental health. All of that is governed by your gut health. And the more diverse bacteria in the gut, we know is like the biggest contribution to your overall wellness. And so we know that all health starts from the gut, and you know, as much variety of fermented products that you can bring into your diet is really one of the keys to, I think, overall wellness. One big pillar.
Agreed. Raquel, so when you're farming kefir grains, you must generate a lot of kefir in the process of doing that. Is it more than you can drink yourself? And so do you share it? You share it with friends?
I share it. Yeah. You know, there's a cheesemaker, Beto. I don't know if you met him, from Chiapas. And now he has beautiful store cheeses from Chiapas. And so he uses it as a starter. So sometimes he comes and grabs my kefir.
Awesome. We got a lot of questions about non-dairy kefir. I know Julie has an opinion about that, even just that phrase, non-dairy kefir. But before we hear from her, Raquel, can you tell us about some of the ways that you use kefir grains besides milk?
Yeah, I use kefir grains for, you know, all of fermentable beverages like fruit juices. What else have I done? Instead of pulque, the aguamiel, which is like the sap from the agaves, it ferments very quickly. You can make cider or with apple juice, or like a fresh fruity wine with the grape juice. And they have to be, I use the Villa de Patos, which is cold pasteurization, but it's pasteurized, because I've made experiments with juices that have not been pasteurized, and no, they have like pectin. So I don't know why it is.
I imagine, yeah, if it's not pasteurized, then there's already a whole ecosystem in there, and you need to overcome that.
Yeah. So if you want like a light cocktail with just a little bit of alcohol and lots of fish, you can use the kefir grains.
Mm.
They're my favorite. I don't even use water kefir. I love the grains. For me, the kefir grains are more, easy, and they're super resistant.
Mm. So for our audience, there's kefir, dairy kefir, which is the subject of this webinar. Then there's a relative known variously as water kefir, tibikos. There's some other names for it. Julie has an opinion that I imagine she'd like to share with us about naming.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's not just my opinion, it's the opinion of the International Dairy Federation, the opinion of Codex that, gives us standards, and, kind of gives us a sense of how to label our food so that we don't have the Wild West, and so that we all have like a uniform understanding of standard of identity. Kefir has always been, for thousands of years, a fermented dairy product. This is what, has been written, again, for over 2,000 years. Whenever any science research piece from Harvard to, you name your university in the US, around the world, they always note that kefir is a dairy product, a fermented dairy. Codex specifically says that for kefir to be called kefir, it must be fermented in a lactating mammal. So, a cow, a goat, a lactating mammal. So, if you're using some kind of culture that, is a distinct different bacteria than the kefir bacteria, then, it should be named something else, like, tibicus, or, what tibius, or whatever the name of the other cultures are, or, the historic name, like kombucha or kvass, or, name your other kind of fermented beverage. But it's not kefir. It's not non-dairy kefir. That's like, non-meat steak. It's something different. So it could be a cultured coconut milk, or cultured almond milk, or cultured soda, or whatever, but it's not kefir. And, the FDA regulates that as well. And, does not allow the name of kefir. Like, we have standard of identity for a reason, because we're, scaling product for 7 billion people around the world. And when somebody buys something, they expect to receive a certain benefit or quality, or, ice cream has to contain a certain level of milk fat and a certain, level of various nutrients. And so, that's why, if you have a non-dairy ice cream or some kind of alternative, it's sorbet or gelato, or non-dairy frozen dessert, so that people know what they're getting. And, it's especially important that we kind of control the standard, because there is science and research coming out around this. And, just by throwing the name on to anything and just bastardizing the definition, would completely dilute any of the research that's ever been done. It would dilute the history, the folklore. And so we are very passionate about protecting the name, and making sure. I personally feel my ancestors have continue to make sure that kefir survives for 2,000 years, and that, it's critical that we don't dilute it now that it's kind of, having a moment, now that it's popular, now that the secret is out around the world. We all have a stake in protecting not only kefir, but other important foods, like, let's say, brie or champagne or feta. These are cultural foods that have history and a definition, and now an incredible vast amount of research. Over 6,000 studies have been done on dairy kefir. So, I can appreciate, the people's desire for innovation and whatnot, but there has to be a level of respect and leadership around how we use the definition and what we call things.
So maybe let's bring it back to where we started, which is, how much can you change the kefir process, or what additional ingredients can you add and keep it kefir. Like, I noticed in some of your products, you have pectin, and then obviously there's fruit and other things. Like what,
you can add it, but you can't take it out, right? You can add flavor, you can add other functional ingredients, but you can't take out the number one component is the lactating mammal as the base to start your fermentation.
So it's a little different from, say, the German beer laws, where there's a list of things you can have and you can't have anything else.
Right.
Yeah. Raquel, did you have any thoughts about any of that?
What you might add? No, about the, yeah.
Naming.
Well, yeah. I started selling kefir grains retail, one supermarket, American supermarket in Mexico. And they bought my idea like quickly. It was like, what? You said yes? Wow. I'm amazed because, you know, retail is commercial. So they have this little section of probiotics. And I was just going to start selling the kefir grains in dairy, which is the only one I know. And some people that started helping me with commercializing in retail. One person was didn't eat meat, vegan. So he said, I need kefir grains in coconut milk. I said, no, you don't. No, you don't. Yes. And so he convinced me, because there's lots of people that, you know, vegan people that do not want to buy animal products. So that's why I have, but they're the same grains, just in dairy or in coconut milk. But now, like a couple of months ago in Mexico, there was a new law that it's prohibited to call milk other than dairy. So now it's not leche de coco, it's bebida de coco, right, or coconut beverage. Right. So I have to change everything. So it's a lot of money.
It's the same with like soy milk, almond milk, all that goes away.
But Mexico, you know, we had to take away from the shelf space if it still said almond milk, or you put a sticker. It's bebida. So it's the same as what Julie says, because you can say milk.
Right. These are regulated standard, you know, terms that existed that have a clear definition. And, you know, again, I can appreciate, you know, the desire for innovation and marketing and whatnot, but we also have to respect the standards and what these definitions mean, or it will be Wild West and people won't know what they're buying. You know, just because you're drinking soy milk doesn't mean that you're getting calcium and vitamin D and other nutrients. And it is important to know when people are buying what they're actually getting. And we can't just have this mess on labels in our countries and around the world. Like that's why there is sort of a codex of how we label things all around the world, that we've kind of come to agree on what things mean and what they are.
Another question of what can be called milk is being settled like state by state in the US, which is also very confusing. And what can be called, I think, there's some question about meat also. It's going to be a huge thing in the next several years, because like what is more or less confusing to the consumer, I think. That's part of the raison d'etre for the Fermentation Association, is to help inform the consumer and establish guidelines and inform regulatory processes. So for anyone who thinks we're getting far afield from kefir, this is actually, you know, quite central, I think.
It is.
Okay. Some oddball questions, like how about kefir versus yogurt? That's a frequent one. I mean, I can say it's a different set of microbes. kefir is fermented with yeast and yogurt isn't. Kefir generally has a larger family of microbes. Kefir winds up being thinner in general, not as gelled. But like in terms of marketing, like yogurt has been in the mainstream in the US since what, the 30s, 40s, maybe 20s. And it hit its stride maybe in the 60s, right? So where, like, do we, I don't know, and we could probably talk about this question for a long time, but maybe like a 1 or 2 minute version. Like, what do we see for the prospects for kefir in Mexico and in the US? And like, how do we tell people, oh, it's sort of like yogurt, but it's actually totally different. And like, here's what you can do. I think the idea of what you can do with it culinarily is good. Like, there are a lot of traditional US recipes that involve buttermilk.
Right.
And it seems like it's a good substitute in for that. But anyway, Raquel, what's your perspective in Mexico for the? Yeah.
Well, I think that between the differences between yogurt and kefir. Well, kefir in Mexico, the industry, Lifeway, we have Lifeway, but I don't know how many years have you been here?
Probably about 5.
It's been growing. It was small, but it's been growing, right? So it's you know, and also with COVID and everything, it's just, you know, people are starting to understand our, you know, Alex and I have been talking a lot about immunity, immune system, and everybody said like, what?
Yeah.
So when COVID comes along and it's okay, you have a good immune system, and so so it's been growing, but it's not as huge, right? And also I think it's the same in the US. We need to, you know, get the message.
Yeah.
So that's why I started with online classes, Zoom, and then Instagram. And so teaching, and people said like, you're crazy, you know, because why do you teach to do at home what you know, you sell at the supermarket? Said, if I don't teach them how, and I don't talk about them, people are not going to buy them. When they get to doing it at home and said, this is not for me, it's too complicated, they'll go and buy. And that's, you know, my business has been growing that way. Because why would people eat sauerkraut or kefir or drink kefir if you are not explaining, you know, about the benefits?
I think a lot of people may not even realize that yogurt is fermented because they've been eating yogurt for, you know, all their lives, and now suddenly fermentation's a thing. They may not even connect the dots. So that's part of the education challenge you point to also, Raquel.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's yogurt in the US is in its infancy. You know, it's fermented foods were not part of the American diet, and the way that kefir and fermented foods in general was used in other parts of the world, from Asia to Eastern Europe to, you know, even India. These cultures all had, and Mexico too, all have fermented foods as one of their pillars, as their food sources and their health and wellness.
Cultured,
right? Cultures, yeah, no pun intended. These cultures have culture, and you know, it wasn't until all this immigration from a lot of these other countries that we started talking about kimchi or kefir or lassi, or, you know, you name your cultured kind of special food. And even I remember when we launched kefir in the US, people didn't understand what it was. We never talked about bacteria. The only 2 brands that existed on the shelves in the 80s right before we launched, my parents launched Lifeway in 1986. Before that, it was just Dannon and General Mills, and they never talked about bacteria. Probiotics was not a term that was used in the US. And no one ever talked about bacteria. My father, as a matter of fact, said, don't talk about the bacteria. People in America freak out about bacteria around their food. And, the big yogurt companies were only talking about it as a diet food, for, using on Weight Watchers or something. It was a food like that. And they never brought up bacteria. And, we did not have the $100 million ad budgets to only sell lifestyle the way that the yogurt companies were selling lifestyle. And so we went right to the key core reason why Lifeway exists, which is to talk about these bacteria and to talk about probiotics and to educate people on what our ancestors intuitively knew in their gut, and what, Dr. Elie Metchnikoff, who we consider, the grandfather of immunity, who kind of backed up what my ancestors thought, and over 100 years ago received the first Nobel Prize around his work, around the research that he did with bacterial cultures and Kefir and the benefit of lactic acid to the body. And so ever since Dr. Metchnikoff did his research, kind of the word is getting out further and further. And again, so like when we immigrated, we started bringing this line to the marketplace and educating consumers. And we started even writing probiotics on our label only as recently as about 2003. It was already after my dad died. And I remember writing probiotics. We were the first company in the US to write probiotic on our label. And we would get our customers calling us and say, oh, I want the kefir that's not probiotic. Don't change. What did you do? And we're like, no. And we had to do a whole infomercial that educated people about probiotics and the benefits of live bacteria. So, now people know more, and they're educated, and probiotics is certainly, widely now known. And we talk about gut health all the time. And, as Raquel mentioned during COVID, I don't think a day passed by when I didn't see some sort of article from some place around the world talking about Kiefer as a benefit towards, reducing COVID and improving immune system, recovering from COVID, along with a whole other, variety of reasons for why Kiefer is great, and including mental health, which I saw one of the conversations in chats. But yeah, mental health is one of the most exciting pieces about the new research that we're just adding on to what thousands of years people have been saying and intuitively feeling in their bodies. But yeah, 90% of the serotonin in your body is created in the gut. And we're now learning that people with a diverse variety of bacteria can help reduce their stress, depression, and anxiety. And yep. I can't imagine a better thing during COVID.
On the subject of foods and immunity, I mean, when COVID struck and people in the US and elsewhere were stockpiling toilet paper, in Japan, apparently they were stockpiling natto, which is a very special fermented soy product that has compounds in it not found in anything else. So it's just something to think about. I'll bring Amelia back in. I know there are some questions from the audience, and there was one more question I wanted to get to. Maybe we'll get to it at the end, about like low fat, non-fat versus full fat versus more than full fat, like making a kefir out of like half and half or heavy cream or something like that. But Amelia, the floor is yours.
All right, well, that's fine. If Julie and Raquel want to answer that question, your question, Alex, about low fat, full fat.
Okay, sure, I'll frame it a little. I'm not afraid of dietary fat. I think we're in a post low fat era at this point. And I guess I'm curious if either of you has made kefir out of heavy cream, or at least something more than 3.25%, standardized whole milk.
We have, yes, we have a Greek style version where we add cream in addition to whole milk. It's delicious. It's absolutely delicious. We're noticing that, you know, like you said, Alex, to your point that, you know, we're past the low fat, non-fat stage, you know, of the 80s and 90s. And I think we're kind of wising up to the fact that eating fat doesn't make you fat. And we also have like a fat phobic society. But those, you know, that's not like a thing anymore. While we find that low fat and non-fat dairy continues to decline, the demand for whole milk is just growing exponentially. And people really want a high premium version of it. You know, they want organic or grass-fed. We're just launching right now a whole line of grass-fed kefir, or small batch, you know, kefir, or locally sourced milk, you know, or yeah, the various varieties still exist, of course. And, you know, we want to offer people whatever they need. If they want a non-fat, we have it. We have low fat, whole milk, of course. But yeah, I mean, variety, especially in the US, is necessary.
Raquel, have you tried making a kefir with a higher fat?
Yeah, you know, I love cultured butter.
Ah, yeah, of course.
So you culture the cream, and then you separate, you know, after it ferments with the kefir grains, you just churn it, and you have the buttermilk and the butter. And it's delicious.
It is the most straightforward way to make cultured butter, right? Because it's a room temperature process. You don't have to do anything weird, and there's not as much uncertainty. Like, I mean, you can make cultured raw milk butter just by, you know, clabbering it. But yeah, that's a great point.
That's another way to use the kefir grains to make cultured butter.
Right, right.
Or cultured cream.
Right.
Maybe you can even do cultured cream with the kefir.
Mm-hmm. Sounds delicious.
Mm-hmm.
I do make a delicious kefir butter. It's in my cookbook. It's like one of the first recipes, and it's to die for.
Mm.
All right, I will ask some of the questions we had come in through the chat. Julie, we had quite a few people that wanted to know, that wanted more details on culturing after pasteurization.
I mean, it's as simple as, you know, all of the ingredients go through a pasteurization process. And then we inoculate everything that's been pasteurized, all the ingredients, and we inoculate it with our kefir and ferment. And it's very simple, actually, but hard. It's both simple and hard.
Raquel, we had a question for you. People wanted more clarification on, you know, when you refer to dairy kefir grains and water kefir grains, are those technically the same thing?
Different. It's totally different. The water kefir, they're called típicos in Mexico, and they resemble like crystals. Okay. And they ferment water with piloncillo, or like molasses or sugar. But here, typical here is something called piloncillo, with panela, right?
Jaggery. In India, it's jaggery, and then in it's basically brown sugar, give or take.
It's brown sugar. It's the one that has more minerals, you know, where it's sticky. So that's the water kefir, and they're totally different. As the milk kefir look like cottage cheese, and they're white. These are like transparent and look like crystals. And for example, you use like 1 teaspoon to ferment of milk kefir grain to ferment like a cup of milk, and to ferment like 1 liter of water kefir, you need like 2 cups of water kefir grains. So it's totally different.
You ladies touched briefly on yogurt. We had quite a few additional questions on yogurt. People want to know, we had a question, I've heard milk kefir is much more beneficial has much more beneficial bacteria than yogurt. Are the bacteria in a yogurt and a kefir different?
Yeah, they are different. It's different grains. Kefir cultures are distinctly, different. There's over 12 strains that we're using. And they're live and active. Again, the yogurt that's produced in the United States is so mass produced and so over pasteurized and overproduced that there's practically nothing living in it after it's been processed. I'm
sorry, can I ask, is that true of sort of the high end yogurt brands too, or are you talking more the mainstream ones?
More mainstream, and I haven't even had the chance to go and test some of the smaller brands, but yeah, they're not quite the mass produced ones. Big brands are not active. And in terms of dairy, I'm just reading in terms of the dairy versus non-dairy fermented products in general, the research found, you can look up a study from UC Davis. I forgot the Dr. Mara, but if you look up like, are all probiotics the same or something in UC Davis, they found that for the bacteria to really work properly and do what it's supposed to do, it thrives in a dairy source. The bacteria use the lactose in the milk as its food source. That's what keeps it alive. It keeps it living. It loves the dairy source. It's the reason why people who have lactose intolerance can still consume kefir without having any problems with digestion, because the bacteria is pre-digesting the lactose for you, making it very easy to tolerate and digest. The other important piece is that the gut is a highly acidic environment. So the gut destroys, it eats up all of the various, bacteria. Like, let's say you're just taking a probiotic pill. Most probiotic pills, if not all of them, will die in the gut. It won't make it to the lower intestines. It won't go all the way through the entire digestive process, which is really, really important. So
don't they usually have a coating on them though?
It doesn't matter. The dairy is what coats the bacteria. It provides this shield and it's able to make it through that entire digestive process. So that's another really important piece. I frankly don't even take a probiotic pill because I find that it's ineffective. It's maybe if I'm traveling, to a country where I can't have kefir, I might use a probiotic pill, but mostly I've just found that they're kind of a waste of money. That the best way to get that good bacteria is through a fermented dairy source like kefir. I really think it's the most effective, most active probiotic in the world.
Great, thank you for that. We had a few questions for Raquel. Can you provide more details on cold pasteurization? How are you doing cold pasteurization on a non-commercial scale?
No. I said I buy the cold pasteurized fruit juices from a local store called Villa de Patos that has an HT. I don't know the name of this machine. Hiperbarica. I think it's from Spain, and it's beautiful. They just put the milk through and all of the fruit juices, so it's cold pasteurized.
The machine itself is pretty expensive, if I remember.
Yeah, super. So I couldn't do it at home.
Okay, question for the both of you. We had a few people wondering about the future of kefir. Raquel, you mentioned you're getting more and more people signing up for your classes. Julie, we've seen Lifeway's kefir sales just skyrocket this past year, but it's still, you know, despite how popular it is, we're still not seeing it fully mainstream like a yogurt. What do you think are some of those barriers for building the industry?
The industry.
The industry, right?
Well, maybe not the industry is not the best word. Sorry, I'm reading right off this question.
Yeah.
What do you think are the barriers for making kefir more widely accepted?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think awareness is still, you know, we're always working on education and awareness for all sorts of healthy lifestyle. I mean, not just for kefir, for a wide variety of kind of public health initiatives. It's an ongoing battle to get people to, you know, do the right thing, you know, eat the right thing, make positive lifestyle choices, and educating. And every generation, there's a new generation that we have to educate. The other piece is just, you know, capital. I mean, if we had the budgets of the, you know, multinational corporations, then, you know, maybe we could expand that even more. But, you know, we're kind of still a small operation, even though we're, you know, kind of large. It's still a very small market. Like, to your point, it's in the US, the average consumption of cultured or fermented foods is dairy foods is maybe like 9-10 cups a person per year. And in Europe, the consumption is 28 cups per person per month, which means that everybody in Europe is eating some kind of cultured dairy just about every single day. Because, you know, where I come from, it's been used medicinally from the time you're born till the time you die. You know, a typical lunch back in the former Soviet Union, when my parents were growing up, was a quart of kefir and a loaf of bread. And, you know, it was very meager and humble, but it was magical and very special. And it was a superfood that healed their bodies. And so when you're born, you know, consuming it, and you've developed that taste palette, then it's very easy to, you know, play in the space and have a diet that's very rich in probiotics and kefir and all sorts of other kind of fermented foods. And in the US, you know, we have more of a kind of a fast food nation, more of a, you know, 300 million people that we're trying to produce food for that's affordable, and unfortunately not quite, we're just not there yet. But I think it's growing. I think that we definitely, especially post-COVID, are recognizing the importance of our food sources, of the benefits of how, you know, these small steps that we can make in our lifestyle choices can aid to a bigger overall wellness kind of picture, and that our health is linked to each other. And I think that's kind of, you know, the biggest, the hurdles that we experience. But, you know, people are hungry for it. They want it. Once they learn about it, once they taste it, they fall in love with it. They're hooked. So yeah, hopefully we'll continue to grow it.
Yeah, education, that's it.
And organizations like the Fermentation Association build awareness of fermented foods.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Julie, we had a question. Why is it so important for Lifeway to label grass-fed on all their products?
Yeah, well, you know, first of all, just the ethics and treatment of our agriculture, of, you know, our cows, is a continuing important, you know, conversation that we're having, that our consumers want to know about and care about. And, you know, sustainability overall is a very important conversation that is happening around the world. And, you know, it's something important to our marketplace and to us as a company as well.
Raquel and Alex, and Julie, feel free to chime in. We had a question specifically for the two of you. How does the usage of raw milk for kefir affect the pathogens in milk?
So there's no state outside of California, there's no state in the US that allows raw milk for commercial sale. And we don't have cows in our yards here in Chicago or other places around the country. So we don't produce any kind of raw milk kind of kefir. And again, frankly, with 300 million people in our country in the US and 7 billion people around the world, I kind of started talking about how sanitation and food safety is the number one kind of piece for us, and hopefully for any food manufacturer. While people might find some kind of benefit from raw milk, I don't think that the risk is of having a pathogen or, God forbid, some kind of disease in the milk from a cow or whatnot. I don't think that the risk is at all worth it to risk the health and well-being and lives of our communities.
Raquel, do you want to take a crack at it, or shall I?
Well, I've used, because it's the same.
Yeah,
so you can't sell raw milk. But having said that, we've had cheese courses, and we've gone up to ranches where there's, the very high standard for the milk. And so we culture the raw milk with the kefir as like a starter. And so that's how you start making the cheese. And then you age it, but it's a process. So then you like pasteurize the milk, maybe when you heat it up, and then you have it ferment in a cave for months. So the pathogens die, or you'll see them. When you have a kefir that's passed, or a milk that is not good, you'll see it like bubbling and you'll throw it away. But I wouldn't do that commercially, right? Because it's prohibited.
Yeah, I mean, I've bought raw milk commercially or on-farm sales in a number of states, and I don't know if the laws have changed, but I sort of view raw milk as it already has a microbial ecosystem in it, and it's sort of trying to install the kefir ecosystem in raw milk is sort of like taking a place that already has residents and trying to put some other residents in it, which historically has been done far too often, but we won't stray into politics. I feel like raw milk is sort of its own thing from a culture point of view. So when making kefir, you want to start with pasteurized milk. That said, when making yogurt, you really have to start with pasteurized milk, and you usually have to heat it up, pasteurize it again yourself, because the yogurt culture is not as strong. With kefir, I mean, the great thing about it, well, one of the many great things about it from my point of view, but for the home fermenter, is you can literally take milk out of your refrigerator, put some kefir grains in it, leave it on the counter, and 12 to 24, however many hours later, depending on your temperature, you will have kefir. You can't do that with yogurt. Yogurt, you have to heat it up and hold it at 105 degrees and all this. So to get back to the original question, again, raw milk is a specialized enough product that I think, like, if you're going to do anything to raw milk, unless you're going to use it for cheese, which is a special case, but if you're going to do anything, if you want to buy milk for any kind of value add processing in your home, you may as well just get the best pasteurized milk you can get if you're going to install some new set of microbes in it. So that's my take on it. I've made raw milk kefir, and yeah, there's a lot going on, but it doesn't have as much kefir benefit as kefir that you make from more of a blank slate, I think. So. And 2,000 years ago, it wasn't pasteurized. That's true. That's true.
And a lot of things weren't done, 2,000 years ago. I mean, we evolve and we have to make food that's mass produced for 7 billion people, and, do it in a way that's safe. And of course it works. It's not that it doesn't work. It's just that, we have food safety, we have standardization, we expect, uniformity in what we're buying. Imagine if every time you bought you know, one of our products, it was always different. I mean, we would have, you know, people very angry.
This is the perspective for commercial production. Like if you're making it at home and you
do anything at home.
yeah, if you trust your source, and if you're, you know, it's a whole different ballgame of what makes sense to do at home. And yeah, so these are all great questions. I'm seeing they're a little bit out of scope. It is possible to make safe raw milk. You know, if you have a smaller dairy farm and adhere to good hygiene. I mean, the original reason for pasteurization of milk was because the conditions on dairy farms were so awful when dairy farms became industrialized. So if you have a small, you know, family-ish size dairy farm, you can make very good raw milk. But in addition to whatever hygiene challenges there are also huge regulatory challenges now in the US and in Mexico. And so like, you can do it. Organic Pastures does it. They sell a kefir, and for various reasons, they couldn't call it kefir for a long time. I don't know if they still do, because it was made with raw milk. And I think, I don't remember the exact story. It's easy enough to look up. Anyway, so that's my take on making kefir with raw milk. But yeah, I mean, yes, if you're doing it for sale, then, you know, I don't think it's hard, at least.
It is, and it would never pass a health inspector. Sadly, a reason we need to change, you know, adapt some of those regulations in the US. Julie, my last question for you, specifically about probiotics. I loved that, you know, you said your story about putting probiotics on your label, and it confused people. Tell me why that is important to you to have probiotics on your label, and how do you guys go about testing your probiotics?
Sure. So we send our kefir to a lab to test all the colony forming units, the CFUs, which gives us a sense of, you know, the level of activity. It's also how we test other, you know, competitive brands and kind of see what's on the market and, you know, how active things really are. It is incredibly, you know, for us, the whole point is about the probiotics. The benefit to people and their gut health is one of the most important factors in our overall health, and that's what, you know, we're here for. So I guess, you know, kind of to answer why probiotics are important, I kind of touched on, you know, in modern day, we travel, or used to travel. I'm excited that we might get to start traveling again, but we travel, we have, you know, a high level of stress. We're taking, you know, other medications, even the use of hand sanitizer, which is so scary that, you know, the amount of hand sanitizer that we're using now, and antibacterial soap. All of these are things that disrupt the microbiome, and a lot of, we believe a lot of autoimmune diseases and like things like Crohn's disease, irritable bowel, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, a lot of these kinds of conditions are many people, and including some food allergies, ADHD, even autism. There are some studies that are, you know, pointing to the fact that we've kind of created an over clean, germophobic society that, you know, if our bodies aren't fighting an outside kind of pathogen, it starts to fight itself. And so, you know, one of the ways to counteract this disruption in our microflora is by the use and the introduction of consistently replenishing microflora, including diversity of bacteria, you know, a variety of food sources that offer bacteria. The diversity is kind of always the king. It makes for great leadership teams, and it makes for great food and environments in the gut to give you the strongest immune system and overall wellness.
Thank you for that. And Julie had mentioned earlier a study on probiotics and fermented foods. We had some of those microbiologists and scientists involved in that study in one of our past webinars. Please, if you are interested, for those of you watching and more information on probiotics and fermented foods, go ahead and go on our website and look at those webinars. We have the new definition of fermented food and our fermented foods probiotics. And kefir was specifically mentioned in that study as a fermented food that is tested and proved to have probiotics. So I wanted to thank Julie, Raquel, and Alex for being here today and sharing their insight with us into this fermented beverage. Thank you to all of you for attending today's webinar. We will post a recording on TFA's website in the next 24 hours. We also have a number of great webinars coming up in the next few weeks, including Building a Fermented Brand with Sasha Strauss and a Yeast Primer with Richard Priest. Please go to fermentationassociation.org to check these out and register. And while you're there, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. It's a great conversation.